beautiful. I can't believe the colors. They're just so vibrant.
In the morning, the purple grapes just, they almost, look like they're painted instead of real.
Yeah, yeah, it really does. And they're so, just so round and plump and firm and.
Well, this variety is called Marquette, and it is one of my most cold hardy varieties in the vineyard. It is bred not just for great wine and for cold hardiness. It is one of the new varieties out of the University of Minnesota that is also finally bred for some disease resistance.
Nice.
So it helps me stay as organic as I can be.
Right, right. Because I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, but there's so many things out there that you have to deal with every day. To have one less thing to have to worry about, you're so much better off. Today we're here in my backyard with Virginia Carter, and she is the owner
and vintner
of,
well, co-owner and with my husband.
Yes, of the
Walpole Mountain View Winery at
right.
Barnett Hill Vineyard.
Excellent, excellent. And you guys have won awards. It's unbelievable. The Farm of Distinction, and then the Agriculturalist of the Year Award for the Walpole Grange.
Yeah. It's been an amazing year.
It has.
I think people have finally have been really taking notice of all the hard work and the energy and the excitement of having a vineyard in our local area.
Right, right. And it's not something that just pops up overnight either.
Hardly.
You started this back in 2004?
In 2004, I started planting grapes. There's a block over to the west of us right here. You can't see it right now. That was my experimental vineyard. I planted 27 different varieties, and I was trying to see what would actually make it on this cold, windy hill. And luckily, most of them survived, which told me what to plant in the rest of the vineyard that would make it, would not just be marginal here, but thrive here, which I know I didn't think that. I was doubting. I didn't think that you could grow grapes in New Hampshire. And up until a dozen or so years ago, you really couldn't do it commercially. The vines hadn't been created that were cold hardy enough.
So you said they weren't cold hardy enough. How did those develop? There was a gentleman in Minnesota.
Yeah, Elmer Svensson in Wisconsin, actually.
Okay.
And he spent his entire life hybridizing. He'd be out there with tweezers. They talk about them. They have pictures of him hybridizing and pollinating the grapes to get these cold hardy varieties. And the University of Minnesota teamed up with him, and he had a huge experimental vineyard already. And they came up with these varieties, and they're grown all over the Midwest and in a lot of northern places now, North Dakota, you name it. There's these wonderful hardy varieties being.
Wow. So you can grow them here, but what makes this hill so important to growing grapes?
Well, to say that you could grow them anywhere in New England is not quite true, or New Hampshire specifically. You need high elevation to escape the spring late frosts and to get that extra couple weeks on the tail end when you need them to ripen in the fall. You also need good drainage. They don't like their feet wet. They like nice gravelly soil, which we have. If you had really rich, loamy soil, that's all you'd get is leaves. You wouldn't get grapes. The old saying is you're pretty mean to the vine, and you're just really good to the grapes. So yeah, it's really important to have the right site, and you have to have sun all day long. Plus, we actually pluck the leaves away from the grapes in around second week of July, so that we get as much sun on them as we possibly can. Otherwise, they won't ripen. Even though they look so nice now, without all that extra tender loving care, they wouldn't look this way right now.
Wow. And so right now it is September. It's early September. Are these a little bit early this year?
Oh, very early.
Okay, so this is 2012 when we're filming this. So this year has been a strange year. We had a very weak winter. We had a very early spring, and we've had a lot of sun, not a lot of rain. So your grapes are happy.
The farmer's happy and the grapes are happy. Grapes will actually put down a 15-foot or more taproot, and they will go looking for their water. So if you plant your grapes, you water for a couple weeks, but then you purposely let them put that root down and look for their own water and their own nutrition. And then you'll get the best grapes you possibly can get.
Okay, so we have grapes all around us. Here we are in New England. We have the Concord grapes
and the wild
that grow
ones.
wild. I really haven't seen that many of them around right now. And
Not
I know
this year.
No, and I know my grandmother used to make jelly. My uncle used to go out and he'd harvest up the grapes, and she made this delicious jelly. So, what else can you do with grapes besides making wine? You also sell grapes at the farmers markets as well?
I do.
Yeah.
I sell table grapes, which are generally the differentiation is they're sweeter. And they don't have as much acid backbone, so they're not quite as good for wine. And generally, since they don't have the seeds, people, of course, like them better. There is seeded table grapes, so people usually prefer seedless grapes. They can use those for jelly, but you can also use wine grapes for jelly. They make wonderful jelly. You just have to, take in your process, you have to get rid of the seeds along with the skins. There's so many varieties of grapes. Your jellies would turn out completely differently depending on which varieties you're using.
Yeah. You go to the grocery store and
Oh,
you
yeah.
have the green grapes, you have maybe the dark
Purple and the
grapes
red.
and the red grapes.
And they
that's
all
it.
taste the same.
Yeah,
I
they
know.
do. I know. And so, when you're talking about so many varieties of grapes here, I just can't imagine how you do your mixing and, how many varieties of, say, you're making a red wine, how many varieties might you use in making that red wine?
Well, generally, if a variety, say Marquette, presents itself in a way that has a very interesting aroma, a mouthfeel, and a finish, I'm going to use that as a varietal, one grape in the bottle. Some grapes have one of those parts, but not all of them. So they might have a really interesting aroma, not much of a mouthfeel, not much of a finish. So that's when I start blending. So I look at every grape. We take a day out every year when we're getting ready to do our blends. We'll do a day for reds and a day for whites. Doing it all in one day is a little too much. And so then we'll analyze each of the grapes. And actually, it's fine. It's finished wine by that time. And we'll say, okay, we'll rate them. This one is a number 1 in aroma. This one's a number 2 in finish. It's a number 3 in mouthfeel. And we pair them together. We try different percentages, and that's how we come up with our blends.
So how did you learn to do this?
Well, everywhere I could. I mean, you can read a lot about how to make Chardonnay or whatever. You can travel, which I did, but the majority of what you do is just by doing it. And then as you're proceeding, you learn more and more, talk to other winemakers. We're lucky here in New Hampshire. We have some people that are also starting to grow these grapes, and so there's other people to start talking to ask. And you experiment. I do lots of experimental batches with different levels of oaking and the blends, and so you just build on your successes and your failures through
your experience.
Again and again.
Right. So not everything turns out the way you're hoping, but
No.
But you've got so much success here. I mean, your wines, you've got a beautiful place up here for wine tasting.
Thanks.
And you've got an area down below, I believe, where you do
Where the
some
production
mixing.
room is.
Yeah. And you've got all these different grapes. So I think we should probably take a little walk and see what else you have here.
Sounds great.
Okay.
You want to try a grape before you go?
I would like to try.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, are these going to be sweet or?
Oh, this time of year, they're starting to sweeten up. We'll
Yeah.
be picking these in a couple weeks.
Oh, that is
Nice,
I
huh?
could easily.
And sometimes how you can tell a grape is
Ah.
getting ripe is what you're going to do is you squish out the seeds and
Yep.
see how they're starting. I know you probably can't tell that far away, but they're brown. While they're green, they're not ripe. So the first thing what I'll do when I come out and start testing is I'll say, okay, let's take a look at the color of the seeds. I don't even bother putting them in my mouth until the seeds are brown because they're very tart. And then what I'll do is I have a little tool called a refractometer. I come out here and I test all different parts of the grapes in the trellis, outside, where they're getting the sun, where they're not. And then I take an average and I find out what the sugar amount is. That'll tell me when I can start harvesting.
Well, let's take a walk. So Virginia, you said you started out with 250 vines.
Yes,
It looks
and-
like you have a few more than 250.
We started those up there, and those were all wine grapes. But we saw pretty early on that there was a lot of interest in table grapes. And so we started planting in this section we started with 3 varieties of table grapes, but then we moved on to having 4 now. One of them still isn't mature enough. Let me pick one here for you.
Oh wow, those are beautiful.
Aren't
Can I
these
taste
pretty?
them?
Oh, please do. One of them is actually, when people come to pick, you'll see this little shriveled up one. and everybody is used to like what you buy at the grocery store. It's rotting. This isn't rotting. This is turning into a raisin.
Can I try that one too?
Oh yes.
That's so sweet. And
Intensely
these do not
sweet.
have the little seeds that we had in
No,
the other grapes.
exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
I think I want to take these home.
You can take these home. Here you go. These are yours.
I feel
You can
like
start
I
a
have gold
collection.
in my hand. Oh gosh.
And
you know,
about 40 pounds more, and you can have some jam.
when I was growing up, or when I go out into the woods even now, you go out and you see grapes, and you think, oh, wild grapes, and you go and taste one, and they are the sourest little thing that you've ever had.
You know why? You're tasting them before they're ripe.
Oh.
And of course, once they're ripe, the animals
gone.
eat them, so you never get them.
Because I never see them in the woods when they're like beautiful color or anything like that.
No.
They're green, and so I figure, oh, they must be the green grapes. But I think they're supposed to be purple actually. And you're right.
They never get there.
No,
because the animals know about it. They can. It's like the birds here. Why I have full netting. Once about the first week of August or so, then they start to go through what's called veraison, is where the colors are turning. That's when it triggers them. They can smell that they're starting to get a little sweeter, and that's when everybody four-legged and with wings gets interested in what's going on over here.
Yeah. So you have predators.
We have every predator you can imagine.
Right.
We actually have bears that come up from the bottom, and so I try to stay as organic as I can and as neighbor friendly, and so I use some very modified versions of animal control. And I don't know if it's controlling, but I guess it is. So far it's working.
Right.
We put Irish Spring soap at the top of all the posts around the back, so every time it rains, the bear smells it, thinks there's humans down there, and so far they've been taking another path.
That's great.
Yes, so
Because there's
far.
a lot of bears this year too. That's another thing
yeah.
about the weather this year. Wow. So you've got turkeys too.
Turkeys,
Deer.
raccoon. Well, the deer don't really care much about the grapes.
Really?
They love in the spring when all the young shoots are starting to come up. They want to eat those all off, so we have a perimeter fence, electric perimeter fence, keeps them out pretty well. And you can also, if you do have put up a little fence around your garden, a little tip is to take some tin foil and wind it around the wire, put a little peanut butter on it, and so that as soon as the animal goes to lick it, they get quite the shock.
Oh yeah.
And so that will help your fence last a lot longer.
Well, and that's what we do for beekeeping too.
You do
we
too?
try to encourage like a bear to touch it or whatever. It's not to hurt them, it's just to encourage them not to want to come back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Right. In a nice way.
A non-invitation.
Right, right. So how do you keep other pests that are like this big away? Do you have problems with any kinds of insects or anything like that?
Well, grapes are actually known for having every kind of fungus imaginable on it. And so we start very early in the spring with organic methods. We'll spray after we prune, we spray the vines with some lime sulfur, which is organic. It's a corrosive kind of thing so that when the buds open, they're opening up into something other than last year's fungus. And then after that, once we get some shoots, then we spray it with copper, again, organic. And so we try to stay as organic as we can. And homeowners can do that too with their little backyard vineyards. And I recommend after every rain, especially if it's a rainy summer, get out there with some sulfur, spray some sulfur on there, because as soon as it rains, it washes off and you're not protected again.
Yeah, and I mean, these are just beautiful. You can tell that you've really done a great job.
But they're not perfect because being organic, like you'll see a berry in there now and then, and you have to just put up with that little bit of not perfection that you're going to see in the grocery store.
But what would you rather have?
Good flavor.
Right, and good for you?
Or perfect berries that look,
No, I mean, they are going to taste great. They just might not look like that perfect fruit. I mean, and that's one of the things I think that we as consumers have to get used to. And understand that you can have excellent food. It doesn't have to be perfectly round or perfectly colored, because that's just the skin in most cases. It's the fruit that you're looking for that's going to give you all that nourishment. Yeah,
exactly.
So you went from 250 to how many vines?
So yes, the first 250 were represented 27 different varieties of grapes. Some of them were not cold hardy enough, so they would die back to the ground every year. And as you can see, you need established trunks here. So you can't have a plant that dies back every year. You'll never get any grapes because it takes a couple years to start, forming grapes. Or they harvested too late. If they can't harvest by, say, mid-October here, then it's it's not a variety that's really good here. And that's what I was looking for, is grapes that would just love it here. And the other thing is disease resistance. I want to stay as organic as I can. If it's a plant that requires restricted use pesticides put on it every other day just to keep it in good shape, it's not for me.
Right.
So those went. So after that, I figured out which ones were going to be the ones I wanted to order more of, because by then I could taste them, I tried making some wine with them, and then I knew what I needed to plant more of. And they're coming out with new varieties all the time. Unfortunately, I'm running out of room to plant them.
Well, I think you've got a good start here. I do see this hill here. I don't know if you can put some up there. We'll
maybe.
see. We'll see. But you got to get that sun.
And it has to be sun.
Right.
And it also has to have the right soil. So I always, have to test first, make sure that it's going to be good to start with, because trying to recreate something that isn't where it's meant to be wasn't what I wanted to do.
It. Yeah. So I just want people to know that even though I'm a beekeeper, grapes do not need bees to pollinate.
Oh, yeah, that's all but one. Out of my 32 varieties, there's only one that needs to have either bees, or how we get around it in the vineyard is we plant this row between two other rows, and the wind coming back and forth will pollinate them from the other plants. Mm-hmm. So that's how we get around it.
So are the grapes, I don't know if you know this or not, but are the grapes in the wild, are those wind pollinated as well?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because I've always wondered, they're self-pollinating.
Right.
They have the male and female part, so they're self-pollinating. Yeah. I assume they were, but I don't know. I've never looked into them.
So when your grapes are pollinating, it must look like a little field of yellow clouds. No,
you don't see it at all.
You never see it. Wow.
What the grapes put out is their flower looks like a little mini lilac.
Right.
And so my worst fear is that at that time of year, the wind, we have quite a wind situation here, that it'll blow up and that it'll shatter the flowers before they've had a chance to be open enough with the pollen to pollinate.
Right.
That it'll just blow by. And those are years where I don't get good fruit set. Mm-hmm. So, and it's a critical day or two, and each variety does that at a different time.
Right.
So,
yeah. So it's a lot of timing, Mother Nature, right? And I mean, you get what you get. I mean, you do the best you can, but you can't control everything.
Mother Nature.
You can't control everything, Virginia.
Mother Nature always gets the last laugh. Always. I don't care what you're growing.
I know. So you've got some beautiful vines here. So once things are mature, you have people that come in, and you have volunteers that come in and cut. Now, not everybody can be a volunteer here, though, right? I mean, like, you can't just come off the road and just say, hey, I want to volunteer. What do you have to do to be a volunteer?
Up at the winery, if you come in for a tasting, we have a sign-up sheet, and we start early in the spring. People enjoy what's happening here. They'll come in, they'll have some coffee and Danish in the morning, and then we'll head to the vines, and we'll pick for a couple hours, and then they come back up, and they have a wine tasting and some homemade lunch, and they go somewhere else, and my grapes are picked. And it takes a village to have a vineyard, because it's, and I think it's just, when you see how people enjoy, picture a day like this, you're sitting here, you're chatting in the vines with other people, some you know, many you don't. It's just a really wonderful social experience.
Yeah, and then to see what you have left. I mean, that's the other thing too, is you're picking all these grapes. How many times do you get to see a bushel of grapes? I mean,
we take pictures like that with everybody around the grapes.
A bushel of apples, but a bushel of grapes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's actually a lug. It's actually a lug. A lug of grapes, and they're piled up. Like at the end, I've got a picture from last year. They were piled up here, and everybody's standing around them. It feels like such bounty.
Yeah, to be something very proud of.
And then we jump in the barrel. That's the other thing.
You seriously do?
We seriously do. At the end of the day, we take some of the grapes, we put them in the barrel.
You don't have to wear a skirt in the...
We encourage that. we absolutely encourage that.
I love Lucy.
Men and women. There's guys with beards in there with Lucy outfits on, but it's lots of fun.
Maybe we'll come back and see if we can get some footage on that.
And purple feet.
That is so cool. Well, so then once they are picked, and everybody has had a few drinks now.
No, a wine tasting.
Wine tasting. Now you're ready to go up to the production area. So,
that happens the very next day. And what we'll do is we'll bring the grapes in and we crush them. If it's a red grape, what we'll do is we'll put it in pre-fermentation barrels, and they will start to soak, a cold soak, and that gets all the tannin and the color into those reds. If you didn't, which I'm going to try this year with my Marquette, just to crush and press it right away, we'll end up with a white Marquette, which is
because you don't have the color.
right.
Right.
You have a little.
Right.
I'm thinking we'll get a little pinkish, like a white Zinfandel that people like.
Yeah.
And then if it's a white, we actually crush them and immediately press them and get the juice, and that goes in the tanks. And then we start putting the yeast and so on to get them going.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we're going to show some pictures of the production area. I don't think
Okay.
we're going to go up to it today, but we will show some pictures of the production area and all that it takes to make your wine. I mean, start to finish, all year round. It's a job that is continuing. But look at all that you get out of it, and to see all the bottles of wine that you have. And how many varieties do you have that you will bottle in an average in a year?
Well, this year we bottled 20 different varieties, and they were many varietals, meaning one grape in the bottle, and many of them were blends as well. We have all the way from dry to off dry to sweet to late harvest dessert. And last year we had about 450 cases. So we're a small winery with lots of variety.
Nice, nice, and it's local.
It's as local as local can get.
So where can people purchase the wines that you have?
Well, we're open on the weekends from Memorial Day through Christmas, but if it's the off season or midweek, you can find us at the Walpole grocery right here in downtown. We're also at Hannah Grimes Marketplace and Ingenuity Country Store. Both of those are on Main Street in Keene. We're also at the Wine Crate up in Hanover, New Hampshire. And also at the Little South Eckworth store.
Nice.
And good luck finding that, because you kind of got to know where you're going and have a good GPS.
Yeah. And then farmers markets. That's where I
Right.
originally saw you.
Yes. And at the Keene farmers markets, and also Walpole here down on the Common.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to try some of your wines. And what would you say to anyone that has an interest in coming up and trying any of your wines? You have wine tasting.
We do wine tastings, so you will visit us and you'll see a short little video that kind of shows you what we do around here and about the winemaking, a little bit about our history. You'll also have an opportunity with your wine tasting to have some local cheeses. And then you'll see that when you're in the tasting room, there's this huge view that you get to enjoy. And so we encourage people to bring friends. We have a lot of either tourists or locals who have people visiting from out of town like to come up and just spend a few hours.
And you were saying that you have a bus coming up?
Oh, yes, we actually have a busload of people from Connecticut. The word is out. And they're going to come up and help us pick. And
Nice.
it's going to be amazing. I can't picture the day where a bus is going to pull into our little winery.
Yeah.
A big tour bus.
Yeah.
But and then they're going to go down and enjoy probably the chocolates at Burdick's, and there's a lovely gift shop, Ruggles and Hunt in town. And
We're just so lucky to
Artisan
have this
Gallery.
all in this area.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
The creamery, they can have ice cream, chocolate, wine, cheese, everything right here.
Everybody's going to be smiling and very,
Yes.
very talkative. So
Yes.
today we have been in my backyard with Virginia Carter and her winery, and your family's winery.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it is a family business. So it's right here in my backyard, and I really encourage you to stop up and try some wine, get some table grapes, use the grapes. There's so many different things that you can do with them.
And while you're here, if you happen to wander out and do your own little walking tour, you're going to see my husband working here. You might encounter my son who does all our web work, and my daughter's often behind the counter. So it's really a family business, very local. We appreciate your support.
Excellent. Well, we'll see you again in my backyard.